Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Ruby Barlow. Today we turn our focus to a rapidly escalating conflict that has erupted along one of South Asia's most controversial frontiers, the Pakistan-Afghanistan border known as the Durand Line. What started as border skirmishes has spiraled into a full-blown military escalation, with both countries claiming heavy casualties and airstrikes reported in major cities. The latest violence began on February 26, 2026, when talks between Afghan and Pakistani forces collapsed into open confrontation along the 2,600-kilometre Durand Line. Both sides have fired shells, exchanged gunfire and engaged in airstrikes. Afghan authorities claim 55 Pakistani soldiers were killed, along with numerous terrorists. Claims Pakistan has denied, saying only a small number of troops were lost. In retaliation, Pakistan launched air campaigns targeting Afghan provinces, including Kabul, Kandahar and Paktia, with officials asserting that over 130 Afghan Taliban fighters were killed and more than 200 injured in the strikes. Afghan sources also report civilian casualties, including women and children, following shelling near refugee camps. This has not been isolated clashes, but a broader military push. UN agencies have reported at least a dozen civilians killed in recent strikes, further underlining how the broader conflict is reaching deeper and casting a shadow over a fragile ceasefire that previously held for months. Amid this bloody escalation, Pakistan's Defence Minister Khawaja Asif made a stark declaration, saying that Islamabad's patience has run out and that the country is now in open war with Afghanistan. He blamed the Taliban government for allegedly providing safe haven to militant groups responsible for deadly attacks on Pakistani soil. This declaration marks a remarkable shift. Officials are no longer calling these border clashes, but full military confrontation, involving cross-border strikes, air campaigns and retaliatory ground operations. So, how did this escalate? The immediate trigger was a series of mutual accusations and strikes. Pakistan has long complained that Afghan territory provides refuge to militant groups, including the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and ISIS Khorasan, factions it holds responsible for suicide bombings and attacks across Pakistan. Afghan officials, for their part, have denied official support for these groups and pointed to Pakistani violations of their sovereignty. But at the core of this relentless escalation lies a much older fault line, the Durand Line. Why the Durand Line is always a hotspot? The Durand Line was drawn in 1893 during British colonial rule to define the spheres of influence between British India and the Afghan Emirate. It split the contiguous Pashtun tribal areas, placing many tribes on both sides of the border. When Pakistan was created in 1947, it inherited the Durand Line as its western border. Pakistan recognizes the line as the international border. However, successive Afghan governments, including the current Taliban regime, have refused to formally accept it, viewing it as a legacy of imperialism that divides the Pashtun people. This historical dispute has never been resolved, and today it remains a core source of nationalist resentment, political tension and military incidents. In practical terms, the border is hard to control. Rough mountainous terrain and decades of insurgency make it difficult for either side to deploy effective state control. This has allowed non-state terrorists to operate across the line, further complicating an already fragile security environment. The long legacy of conflict over the years, the Durand Line has been at the heart of multiple conflict flashpoints, from skirmishes to full-scale retaliations. Historical disputes, such as border fencing initiatives and cross-border militancies, have intensified the sense of grievance on both sides. Now, as the region stands on the brink of a protracted military confrontation, the Durand Line serves not just as a geographical divide, but as a symbol of a dispute that history never resolved, and which modern politics has only made more violent. What began as border clashes has now morphed into an open war declared by Pakistan's Defence Minister, with both amenities and military assets deployed across the Durand Line, with casualties mounting on both sides, including soldiers, militants and civilians, and with historical grievances deepening, this escalation could redraw security dynamics in South Asia. The Durand Line, an entity born of colonial geopolitics, remains at the centre of one of the world's most complex and dangerous border disputes. For now, diplomacy seems distant and the guns louder than ever. And now joining us on Deep Dive, we have Raja Muneeb, who is a journalist and Pakistan and Afghanistan expert from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us, Raja.
Thank you, Ruby, for having me on the show.
Now, first of all, in light of Pakistan's transition from localised border containment to a declaration of open war, does the strike of the Afghan capital of Kabul meet the international legal thresholds of necessity and proportionality under international law?
Absolutely. There are two very important things which have happened since yesterday with Pakistan, not only striking Kabul, but also striking Kandahar. Now, let's remember that Kandahar is somewhere where the seat of the power really is, because that's where, Hibatullah Akhundzada governs from. So sending that message, carrying out strikes in Kandahar and in Kabul, basically, brings this war to a threshold of beyond a border skirmish. It cannot be described just as a border skirmish on Durand Line now. But this is not the first time Pakistan, has gone and stuck Afghanistan deep into Kabul when challenged on Durand Line by the Afghan Taliban forces. Because in the last conflict, when the Durand Line exploded, Pakistan did carry out trying to take out what they claimed as TTP chief Nur Wali Masood, who was supposedly in Kabul, and they carried out a drone strike in Kabul. So when you look for it from an international perspective, it is a very worrying situation which is emerging between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now, because of two reasons. Number one, that we have seen that this perpetual conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan has always been there, as you rightly said in your show. Second thing is that given the proximity of Afghan Taliban in the Pashtun land, which they call Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and the way Pakistan has been, blaming Afghan Taliban for harboring TTP, this war doesn't seem to end. It might stop for a few months or for a few days, and then, any other major attack carried out by TTP in Pakistan will automatically again go back to a phase where Pakistan will be forced to carry out strikes to take out TTP members deep within Afghan border. And this will again reach to a stage where escalation between Afghanistan and Pakistan will happen, unless and until Pakistan and Afghanistan do not find a sustained dialogue between themselves on the issue of Durand Line, and they try to, completely solve this issue through diplomatic channels. These skirmishes are something which are going to erupt time and again between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now, given the understanding since yesterday, Pakistan's defense minister had called it an all-out war, but Pakistan's foreign minister has reached out to Saudi foreign minister on the backlights for mediation. They have also spoken to Turkey on the developments which are happening right now, and Qatar has officially gone ahead and offered to mediate again between Taliban and Pakistan. Now, let's remember that last time also it was, talks in Qatar which failed, which then were moved to Saudi Arabia, and then they reached some kind of an agreement. But that agreement is very, very, weak. That agreement doesn't hold. So it's a perpetual conflict which we are going to see breaking between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and it does have international connotation to it. We have to understand that, not only from the American perspective, at the time when Iran, is in the focus of United States, there is a huge talk of, a possible war breaking out between US, Israel, and the Iranians. Having a perpetual conflict or a conflict which is growing next to the Iranian borders, which is both Pakistan and Afghanistan, does have, huge, deep geopolitical connotations to it as well.
Now, given Pakistan's accusation that Afghanistan harbours militant groups like the Tehreek-e-Taliban and Pakistan and the creation of operations, what mechanisms could regional or international mediators realistically employ to de-escalate tensions and prevent a prolonged confrontation along the Durand Line?
Well, the only form of mediation is going to be, which is going to be long-lasting, is the solution of Durand Line and what is acceptable to Afghanistan and Taliban and what is acceptable to Pakistan. For now, we have seen that both sides have stuck to their claims since 1947, and none of them are ready to go ahead and give any sort of leeway to the other in resolving this conflict. But then I think this is a very, very important conflict which really needs to be solved by the international community, needs to be taken seriously by the international community, because the repercussions of this conflict brewing full time will have huge, as I said, has an impact on Iran, has an impact on the entire Middle East. And let's not forget that, till now, nobody has really sat down with Afghanistan and Pakistan and tried to seriously mediate on the Durand Line. They might have talked about mechanisms of ceasefire, of not restoring to fighting against each other, but the core issue still remains, and the core issue has never been discussed in a very professional, or I would say in a very serious manner. I think that is where the crux of this conflict lies, and that is where the international community really needs to step in. India can offer to mediate as well. India has fantastic relationships with Afghanistan, has a very great goodwill with Afghanistan. So does UN can mediate, so can Americans, so can the Muslim world from Saudi to Qatar to Turkey. But for now, no international country has shown an interest where they would really want Pakistan and Afghanistan to sit down and literally, solve this issue for once and for all. And that is the worrying trend here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what were the specific structural flaws in the 2025 Qatar mediated agreement that led to this total collapse? Specifically, did the agreement fail because it lacked a verifiable mechanism for militancy export, or is the current open war a sign that third-party mediation is insufficient when the core dispute is the actual legitimacy of the Durand Line itself?
Absolutely, unless and until you don't address the core issue and you try to build a ceasefire around, let's say, on basis of skirmishes or basis of just fighting, that is not going to hold true, because unless until the core issue is not resolved. And what are the core issues? The core issues is not only the Durand Line. The core issue is also about Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is Fatah. Core issue is about TTP. Now, Pakistan keeps on blaming Afghanistan for the TTP, but Afghan says that, it's a homegrown thing and Pakistan needs to take care of it. Pakistan's own internal security and their own internal, establishment has failed to put any political resolution either to Balochistan or to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And given the sense that Pakistan itself is unwilling to resolve its own issues within its country in a political manner, then opens up the Pandora's box, not only for Afghanistan, but also for the internal insurgency to basically, rear its head inside Pakistan. And that is going to be a perpetual problem between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Similarly, Afghanistan, Taliban has been blaming Pakistan for harboring ISKP terrorists. Even yesterday, when both the armies were clashing, Afghan Taliban carried out a drone strike on an ISKP camp, claiming that they have, they attacked an ISKP camp within Pakistani borders as well. So there is an intra-militancy factor to it. There is a political factor to it. And the Qatar, as I said, these agreements are extremely fragile because they don't address the root cause. What they address is the superficial, issues between the two countries, and they just, it's not going to hold for a very long time. It's going to come back again and again unless and until both the countries sit down in with the third-party mediation, and they seriously work on the issues which are concerning both nations, and especially the root of this is Durand Line, and they need to solve the issue around Durand Line. Till the issue of Durand Line is not solved, I don't think there will be any ceasefire which will hold the test of waters in the coming times between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Okay, Raja, and last question to you today. To what extent does the unresolved status of the Durand Line, a colonial era border that Afghanistan has historically rejected, continue to shape both the strategic calculus of Islamabad and the Taliban government's approach to sovereignty, insurgency, and cross-border security?
Well, no, it does. You're absolutely right, because look, this Durand border has been a bone of contention. Let's remember that Afghanistan, for the longest of the times, didn't even recognize Pakistan as a state when Pakistan was born in 1947. It went to an extent in 1958 where literally the diplomatic relations between the two countries were literally zero. They didn't want to recognize each other as countries. So this line, which has been there since the colonial era, is something which have been rejected by the Afghans since the inception of Pakistan as a country. But at the same time, the problem is that Pakistan has been seeking to find strategic depth beyond the Durand Line into Afghanistan. And we know that Pakistan, right from 1978 onwards, the way the war against the Soviets, the Afghan Jihad war went, how Pakistan was actively involved into getting, its own geopolitical strategic depth inside Afghanistan, to a point where they, even raised Taliban, thinking that they're going to have their own strategic control on Taliban. That has not worked out, unfortunately, for Pakistan. The Pakistani planners have gone horribly wrong there. But given the fact that, traditionally, if you look at it, Pashtunistan is something which was always in contention even before Pakistan was born, because Pashtuns always claimed this land as their own, and it was known as the Fatah. It's well Fatah now. So the Pashtuns have a claim of their own homeland, and they don't recognize themselves to be a part of Pakistan or the colonial era, boundaries which were drawn between Pakistan and Afghanistan. As I said, there is internal factors to it, there are external factors to it. But for Pakistan, holding on to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is extremely important, because without Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Pakistan's security challenges as far as its borders are concerned with Afghanistan are going to be extremely challenging, and Pakistan in no way is in a position to give up its claim on Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or to find a via media wherein Pakistan will have to give the kind of autonomy, autonomy people from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa have been speaking, the Pashtuns have been speaking. So this issue of Pashtun separatism and insurgency within Pakistan is a decade-old problem, and Pakistan has been unable to resolve it either militarily or, more importantly, politically.
Raja Muneeb, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And that was all for this episode of Deep Dive. Please stay tuned for more.